Today's date is January 2nd, 2024. The time is 10:01 a.m. In attendance are Commissioners Brooks and Matari. And I'd like to call this meeting to order. Are there any changes to the agenda? The only one I can think of is that we will just shift Commissioner Duncan's items down to the bottom. And hopefully she can join us before we get to those. Next up is public comment. Would anyone like to make a comment? Okay, Jonathan, anyone online? No? Okay, hearing none, let's move on to business. The first item is the Justice Center update from Turner and Townsend. And it looks like we do not have David Mendez. What's that? Okay. So next one will be the building lease for PMR. One of the things that just concerned me is that we don't have a signed lease yet, but we do have a signed contract for a doctor. And, you know, one of the things that we had been working on with the lease is it's been going back with counsel and so forth. And one of the items, I think the larger item, has to do with the insurance. And Aquifer has a certain way of how their policies are set up with us. And the lease agreement has a different way for the insurance, largely because they probably deal, well, I'm sure they deal with private entities more so than public. And so one of my concerns is the fact that until we have a lease, we don't. I don't know if the landlord is still looking for a tenant because they don't have a lease with us. And my concern is that we'll be in this situation where we might have to start again because either things don't work out or a new tenant comes in with more favorable terms.
That would be the third time we start.
Yes. And so what I was thinking, I actually already lobbed a phone call to a insurance agent to see if there's not a private option for the insurance so we can meet the qualifications for this lease, because my suspicion is that it will come in way below cost-wise for the county than if we pay one extra month for this doctor, which is right now $50,000. So I wish Commissioner Duncan were here because we could talk about that a little bit more. But do you have any thoughts on that, Commissioner Brooks?
Well, so you made an outgoing call, but you haven't talked with anybody in the private?
Yeah, I just gave them some broad stroke specifics. I was really looking for a broad stroke guesstimate of what we would be looking at for an annual premium. My suspicion is because it's a little higher than what is normal, it would be a little more than what I'm used to seeing, but typically, you know, they range in the $1,500 to $2,500 range for the stuff that I've dealt with. And I would expect it to be more than that, but way below what we're looking at if we don't have a place and we're paying for a doctor.
No, because we're going to be paying that doctor regardless.
That's right. That's right. So my thinking was if that's something that we can do, and of course I'll run that by council.
But we do need to move it along.
We need to. It's been weeks, and I'm just concerned that with the clock ticking and us not having anything. Sylvia, did you want to come on up and
we
talk
keep
about
getting
that?
people excited about it.
I know.
And then going, nope, not yet.
Yeah, yeah. Sylvia?
Sylvia Proud for the record. Just to give you an update now that we have feedback from Aquifer and Dave Ferguson, I did send back the portion about the insurance to our realtor, Pat, and that was last week. So it'll be a few days till we hear. One of the delays throughout all of this was they had to do an environmental assessment of the x-ray room. They did find asbestos in it, so they are going to have to abate it before we start leasing it in March.
Yeah.
And so that was one of the holdups that we were experiencing.
Yeah.
And also like what kind of renovations were going to be done, that sort of thing. So I'm hoping there may not be a problem with changing the lease portion of the agreement,
Yeah,
the insurance portion of the agreement with the landlords for this building. The other thing is on the HVAC systems, originally we were gonna be responsible for the premises, replacement and maintenance of it, but they are going to be responsible for it. So that's, they've been pretty flexible, understanding. I'm hoping they'll be understanding on this insurance item, but I don't know if we can go private on
I don't
property
know either.
insurance for it. I'm not sure.
I don't know. It's just that we put ourselves in a little bit of a situation where we've assigned a different contract that commits us before we have the space. And the space is significantly less expensive. And I've never had a problem with carrying empty space as much as I have carrying a contract for staff that's not performing. And
I will ask Pat if the landlord is still looking for a tenant. I
Yeah.
would hope not, but I will find that out and let you know.
yeah, because we really do need to get this buttoned up.
Do-
So, Dave, did you want to add something?
Yeah, Dave Ferguson here. Just a quick comment. The lease that was presented appears to me to be a standard commercial lease. I'm not entirely certain that the landlord insisted that all of those insurance type provisions actually be in the lease because it's a standard form.
Yep.
So it's probably wise to investigate some private insurance. I'm not sure iCrimp would have any say over that or have a problem with that. But before you buy something, I think it's probably worth sending the comments from John Getty and iCrimp and my comments through the real estate agent. This real estate agent, I'm not sure who the person is, but agent can go discuss with landlord, find out whether or not they really care about those provisions or not.
Yeah.
Or whether or not those provisions can be modified to suit our needs. And if they can, then everything moves forward, probably fairly timely fashion. If they're hung up on the concerns that iCrimp and our agent have, then maybe private insurance is an option.
Yeah, and really, it's not meant to circumvent iCrimp. It's really about just setting up parallel options so that if something does fall through, we can immediately go to it versus saying, okay, now what? And then taking more time. Because I can't imagine a landlord, even if they have a really good prospective tenant, would stop at least investigating other prospective tenants. And given the fact that we've been through this situation before where we were negotiating and then kind of lost out because another tenant came in with more favorable terms, we just don't want to be in that situation. So it was really about a matter of being more prudent with managing the time.
Well,
So,
I think it's a good idea to investigate private insurance, and if it's relatively inexpensive, and that's the only option, then that seems wise to do that.
yeah. So,
Just as an aside, it seems like that building has been unoccupied for a while, but I think it is worth, it hasn't.
No, they're still in it.
there's tenants
Oh,
in
I'm
there.
sorry.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm thinking of a different building. So then I think it is probably wise to go back to the agent and find out, are there other prospective tenants sort of competing with us?
Yeah.
Yeah,
that-
that's a good
I will.
thought, yeah.
Yeah, because it's right now currently occupied.
All right.
Yes.
And they're
My
supposed to
mistake.
vacate, what, March 1?
Yes.
By March 1?
Yeah, they're
So-
actually gonna start the abatement mid-February, so they may have their staff out of there before then. But they'll do the abatement starting
Yeah,
mid-February.
okay.
And I will ask Pat that question if they're looking at other tenants. And also,
Or ask that they just give us until a certain time where
Yeah.
they will let us try to get this buttoned up.
right, and I did when they were the holdup on the lease agreement and the terms and stuff, tell them, we're gonna need we'll need some time, at least 2 weeks or more to get through the agreement and have legal review it and any concerns we may have. So they're aware of that. But
Yes,
you know
until
how that
someone
goes.
shows up and says,
Right,
hey,
right.
we're agree to
Someone
everything.
offers them a 5-year lease instead of a 3-year lease, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
That's the tough thing for us.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, well, please keep us posted. And if we need to have another meeting set up just to keep this moving along, I think that would be the better way to go. Because my concern is that we have these discussions at the end of our business meeting, and it's kind of like, well, it's being worked on, right? But there's a difference between something that's being worked on and time going by, which is a depleting asset, right? And other things can happen because we're not being responsive enough. And that's my concern, is the responsive nature of what we might have to be in order to get this buttoned up, so.
Do you want to put it on the status update as a weekly thing for now, or?
I think that would be prudent until we get good answers and we know that this is pretty much a done deal.
And then I
Because
can
we
give
might
you
have to make
updates.
decisions, and I think it's better that the board is here so we can make a decision, and that information is presented hopefully beforehand, so we can review it.
Just keep in mind, if you need to, you can always just provide a 24-hour special meeting notice and take action within
Yeah.
one day if you need to.
Yeah,
Just a reminder.
yep, nope, I appreciate that, so, okay.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay. We have David Mendez here, so let's go to, back to item 1. Thank you. Justice Center update from Turner and Townsend, Heery.
Good morning, David Mendez with Turner, Townsend, and Heery. So, to update where we're at with the construction and budget, I've met with staff. We have a spreadsheet that we're working through. We've updated some costs for the soft costs portion of that. We've looked at one of the big gaps that from what I expect versus what they've anticipated in this budget process is FF&E, which we've talked about.
Which is what?
FF&E is furnishings and equipment for the building,
Okay.
which is a soft cost that's not included in the construction cost of the job. So we're going through the process of, we're going to set up a meeting with staff to determine what those, what's actually going to be provided by, for example, in the courthouse or in the courtrooms, the equipment and furnishings that will be provided by the state versus what we need to come up with the county budget. And so we're in the process of that. So we'll need to probably set up a committee of, we've talked about using existing furniture that's available to the county at low or no cost, and how that fits into this building, how that will, whether that's a realistic approach to this or not. And so we need to answer some of those questions.
Okay.
So the Work Pack 3, the contractor is currently working through the bid numbers. As you were probably aware, we had an issue with an electrical subcontractor, and they have, I believe, pulled out now. So we're looking at going to the second low bidder on that.
Why did they pull out, do you think?
My understanding is there's two explanations for why they pulled out. One is they did not sign the document that they turned in to us. And then typically, when someone is significantly low, we ask that they go back and check their bid for mathematical errors. And they did that. There was some problems with their Davis-Bacon wage rates. So it looks like they're gonna, that they've pulled out of that bid.
Can you explain very briefly what Davis-Bacon wages are for people who don't know?
Sure. So that's, in the state of Idaho, we are a right-to-work state, so the prevailing wage rates that you see in other states don't necessarily apply, but in a federal project with federal funds, they need to see a wage scale determination for each one so that it brings everyone into more of an equal basis for public works payments. And so in the state of Idaho, we do have a state rates, and so they either have to meet that or they have to get a determination of what that wage should be. And so there's some confusion about which wages apply and which wages don't.
And Davis-Bacon is a federal law
It's a federal law, yes,
that's been in place for quite some time.
it has.
And just out of curiosity, does it apply to the project, or does it apply to the funds, the federal funds that are used? Because we're using a significant amount of county funds as well.
I don't know the answer to that in particular. You bring up a good point, but I believe, in past projects that I've dealt with Davis-Bacon, it's applied to the entire project. So when you commit to receiving their funds from federal funds, then you commit that this project is going to be operated under those rules.
Irrespective of how much.
I believe so, but
So that's something that's probably worth investigating.
it is. That's a good question. I hadn't had that asked before.
Because I think it's 26 million for federal funds, and then the balance, which I think right now we have somewhere between 42 and 45 million for the total project cost. So some portion may be exempt from Davis-Bacon if it turns out it allows for that.
Correct.
And then soft costs, would that be part of the project cost?
It is.
Okay.
Mostly, soft costs are professional services and fees, and those aren't subject to any kind of a Davis-Bacon type of because they're not, we're typically not talking about
Yeah.
labor.
Okay,
So,
I understand.
When is the next time we're likely to get a total cost on this building?
next week, we're due to receive the update. That will answer some of the percentage questions that we've been
Okay.
we've been talking about. So once that's, I believe the 9th is the date that Work Pack 3 is due.
So
from the
what
contractor.
meeting will that be announced?
I've got to get with the contractors to see how they're presenting that cost. So,
And that's the construction cost, that's not your FF&E and soft costs.
that's correct, although they do have some typical soft cost items included in their numbers. So, we'll ferret those out and pull them out of what we've budgeted for soft costs, and then so we can give you an answer where your budget stands.
Okay, but you'll probably have a much more accurate picture, let's say by the end of the month, after you've had this committee put together to see what can be brought over from the existing courthouse and other.
Those are decisions, I've talked to you as a body about potential value engineering items. That furniture, I think, will kind of fold into that discussion right now. They've currently got on the 3rd floor of the building, they've got offices set up. I've asked the question whether those, whether the furnishings are for offices, will they fit into the spaces that are provided, or is it more for a cubicle setup? And so that's still a little bit up in the air.
Okay, well, I know that there's a lot of questions for you, so forgive me for kind of pushing a little bit to see when we can expect to get, good numbers that you can stand behind.
Sure.
So, anything else?
Other than, so the soft costs that we've got included in the spreadsheet that that your staff has been putting together with me, is at a little over 4 million right now of soft costs. So it's a little bit up from what we were originally talking about.
What were we originally talking about here?
I think just below 4.
Okay.
So,
All right. So we'll get hopefully that spreadsheet sent to us, if you could send that
yeah,
to us.
I can send, as soon as I audit this, I can send this over to you with the understanding that we still have that soft cost component that we've talked about. Some things that we mentioned, or I mentioned to you in the last meeting, that the contractor has allowed for things like that radio repeater system that they've budgeted $150,000 for, or $100,000 for. So that's typically a soft cost that's in equipment, and that's in their number. So we want to make sure that we're not doubling up on some of these before I give that to you.
But then we also have to know whether or not the equipment we have for the rest of the campus
Right. That's a.
has to be replaced because it doesn't, it's not compatible.
And keep in mind, when we talk about that one, we've also talked about when that will occur. That's a test that has to be done. So the system that you have currently in this building, whether that will cover the new building or not, it's likely that it won't, because you've got a concrete structure that'll disrupt the ability for police officers to transmit and receive calls inside of the the deep dark recesses of the new building. So
Okay.
okay.
All right, well, thank you.
Okay,
I appreciate that.
all right.
Did Commissioner Duncan join us? I heard somebody.
Chairman
Yes, I'm
Duncan.
here.
Okay, well, we had pushed some of your items down until you could join us. So the next item is number 2, removing status pending list, and that was your item.
Yeah, so I see that it's been removed off of tomorrow's business meeting, so I thought we would have a discussion as to your thoughts on that, since we haven't had this discussion in an open meeting. And are you don't want ARPA project updates anymore, or how does that look?
Well, the thought behind it was the fact that a lot of it doesn't seem to get updated with respect to who's doing what, 1, and 2, I think that the updates don't need to be so frequently, given the fact that we have champions who are involved with these projects. And, for example, with the impact fees, every week, I'm just waiting on council to get back with us. And it seems a little bit monotonous, if you will, to just kind of say the same thing over and over, especially when we're waiting on other people. The jail pods, it seems like that's been handed off to the sheriff's office. And Captain Heil is spearheading that project. And even with respect to the facilities expansion, that's been handed off to David Mendez to give the board an update. And it just seems like it either needs to be reworked and kind of maybe we identify the champions of these projects, and then they can give us meaningful updates. But it just didn't seem like, to me, after doing it a year, we were really being informed in a way that said we need to do something. Even with the, were you listening in on the PMR section, Leslie?
No,
Yeah, one of the concerns is the fact that, we've had this lease, let's see, we've been waiting on that since at least the middle of November, roughly, and we don't have an agreement. And my concern is that the board needs to have more engagement with this, because we have one contract for $50,000 a month, whether we have a place or not, and then we have this lease that I don't even know if the landlord is still looking for prospective tenants. And it's been weeks and weeks, and we just want to make sure, every week I hear it's being worked on, but if another tenant comes in and bumps us out, like the last place, we could be spending a lot more money paying for staff and getting zero out of it than the cost of whatever it is that we're trying to negotiate. And my concern is that by getting these weekly updates from individual commissioners, we may actually be hurting ourselves.
So did you go through the questions or the suggestions that Ferguson had on the lease today and make those decisions?
Well, we actually looked at it. We're waiting to hear back from the real estate company. But what I did do is I called up a private insurance broker and asked and inquired as to what a ballpark would be for a private option versus sticking strictly with iCrimp, which is a little bit of a square peg with a round hole, just as a backup option.
And the result was?
And the result is I'm waiting to hear. Sylvia is going to contact the broker, one, to make sure that the landlord is not looking for another tenant while we're in negotiations. And if they are, to at least give us until a certain deadline to get this stuff resolved. And then, of course, providing the landlord with the information about the insurance requirements. But the idea is that we need to be working in parallel with other options so that we can manage to this in a very timely fashion, because the clock is ticking and we basically have less than 60 days to take possession of this property, and we just don't want to be undercut or have another tenant come in with more favorable terms like the last space situation we engaged in. And that's the concern.
Okay, so are you looking for an update every status update now? Or I guess I'm confused at how you want to move forward if we're not going to be addressing it every week.
Well, what we discussed was putting it on as an action item for status update. So that way we can actually take action if we need to. With the business meeting, they're not action items, they're just discussions. Now, as far as putting together something at the end of the business meeting, I'm happy to sit down and talk about it and maybe rework what we've been doing all year. But I don't get the sense that it really has worked as well as it could have and should.
Okay. Do we have other items, or was that it?
Well, there was 2 more items. The next item up is number 4, Commissioner voting records. And this was something that I wanted to present to the board. There really is no easy, searchable way for the public to see how commissioners vote on issues. You can find it if you kind of know where to go and you kind of pour through the minutes. But it seems like it would be a public service to make something very accessible for the public to search so they can find the item, the date, the item, and the ways that the commissioners searched. So with the board's approval, I can work with Jonathan and IT on developing something that is not going to cost the county money, but is basically setting up a table. Well, I mean, buying a $20,000 module.
I would like that.
Yeah. And where we can just set up a table and make it a queryable table with a search box.
Yeah, I'd be interested to hear how that would work out. That sounds like a good idea.
Okay, well then we'll proceed with that. Do we need a motion? We don't need it. No. Okay. And then the last one is the Aquifer Protection District Master Plan presentation, and you're listed with that one, Commissioner Duncan.
Right. Do we have folks in the audience prepared to give the presentation?
Yes, we do.
Okay, can you hear me? This is Nisha Mayani. I'm the chair of the Aquifer Protection District Advisory Committee. And Jonathan, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. Okay, so here with me, I wanted to introduce other members of the advisory board that have joined me today. By Jay Adams, who's the vice chair, Larry Sims, treasurer. Also have Mary Vare and Lauren Scarcello. And as well, Andy Dunow of Dunow and Associates, who was our consultant and assisted us with this master plan. What we intend to do today is to give the BOCC an overview of the master plan with the goal of hopefully obtaining the BOCC's support and approval of the document. I'm going to give you a little bit of background on the APD, talk about what triggered the master plan, our master plan objectives, the process, and the priorities, a couple of them, that were identified. Go ahead, Jonathan. So the Rathdrum Prairie Aquifer is the primary source of drinking water for most of Kootenai County. The community showed its support for protecting this resource in 2006 when over 66% of Kootenai County voters approved formation of the Aquifer Protection District. And then the BOCC established it in 2007. This was further underscored in the county's 2020 comprehensive plan, that support that the community has for our aquifer. And I want to read this quote out of the comp plan because I think it's important. We treasure this place we call home, the beauty of its land, lakes, rivers, and forests ground us in our sense of place. We relish its spaces, its views, and the wildlife that shares it with us. We want to preserve and protect it. Water is an integral part of what we value here. We take seriously our responsibilities to sustain the lakes and rivers that surround us and the aquifer that supports us. I think that's perfect. Okay, so the Aquifer Protection District, since its formation in 2007, has continued its original purpose to coordinate and assist regulatory agencies, fund water quality monitoring, education and outreach, and inspection and prevention of contamination. So off to the side there is just a smattering of partners that the funds have gone to in protection of the aquifer. About 90% of the funds since 2007 have gone to Panhandle Health District and DEQ, as they're the primary regulators and cooperating agencies for protection of the aquifer. So there's some statistics down there. I also wanted to add to that. Over the last 9 years, over $4.3 million have been collected from parcel fee revenue, as well as from the BNSF annual contribution. And about $3.4 million has been invested in the aquifer through these partnerships. So go ahead to the next slide. There was a few things that triggered the advisory board's recommendation to develop a master plan, and this included the sustained rapid growth across the county that we're experiencing. We recognize that growth puts pressure and stress on our resources, and we want to do the right thing. Additionally, changes in Idaho rules, and specifically Idaho's decision to eliminate Panhandle Health District's administrative rule set was one of those. So in that action, they took away Panhandle Health District's regulation of the 5-acre rule, as well as their critical materials program. And then the last thing is just a growing fund balance that the Aquifer Protection District has had, and we'll talk a little bit about that later.
Can you explain a little bit more about this 5-acre rule and and what was done exactly?
Yeah, so under the Idaho Administrative Code, Panhandle Health District, since I think 1976, had regulated that in areas over the aquifer where there is not a central sewer system, the minimum division of property is 5 acres. And that's just to protect, this density of population and septic tanks over the aquifer. And so when the rule, basically Idaho said Panhandle Health District doesn't have authority to regulate those rules. And so that rule was then taken away, but Kootenai County did then adopt the rules separately, locally. So that is in place for Kootenai County. But in some of the cities, Panhandle Health District is continuing to work with the cities to also adopt a similar rule.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
yeah. Okay. So back to the master plan process. So those were items that were primary triggers for the master plan. In November 2022, we selected Dunauert and Associates to assist us with a master plan. And since that time, a lot of work has been put into this effort. And I want to acknowledge that here, because there was a considerable amount of time and collaboration with not just the advisory board, but with our cooperating agencies, being Panhandle Health District, DEQ, as well as Kootenai County staff. So David Callahan and Pat Braden were also part of the discussions in this process. So through this year, this is the end result of the time spent. So go ahead to the next slide. The objectives that were defined and refined during this process: number one, affirm Aquifer Protection District's mission, which is fund aquifer protection activities to assure safe and healthy drinking water, economic vitality, and environmental well-being. Meet population growth and development challenges, review past work and align with future needs, identify new initiatives, and then seek just improvements to the administrative efficiency of the district. Go ahead to the next one. So one of the objectives affirmed, through this process, a priority that the advisory board supports, probably the highest priority behind continuing funding to Panhandle Health District and DEQ, is sensitive aquifer recharge areas. And I want to talk for just a second about what the sensitive aquifer recharge areas are, because I think it's important that we all understand what we're talking about. So, a large volume of recharge for the aquifer comes from surface water, from our watersheds, and more specifically from the numerous lakes that are in Kootenai County. That interface from where the surface water exits the lakes and then runs out onto the prairie and disappears into the aquifer is what we're talking about. Those areas are vulnerable to contamination because the ground is porous and there's a driving force with that water that can move contaminants from the ground down into the aquifer. And right now, nobody regulates those areas. So the surface waters, because they're not navigable surface waters, they're not regulated by the feds. And the groundwater, it's not classified as groundwater, so DEQ doesn't regulate those areas. So areas like Hauser Creek, where if you drive out Prairie, south of Highway 53, just past where the waste station is, you will see one of those areas, and that's there on the map. So this is Hauser Creek coming out of the lake, and then the water just comes out here, and you're familiar with the area. This is an industrial area, so there's, again, no protection there, and those are the areas like that we're trying to delineate and then find protection for. And again, with the Aquifer Protection District and its purpose and how it was formed, this is the way to do that locally. And we can do that through either purchasing those properties or establishing easements there, or looking at land use policy related to those areas. So that's probably the biggest priority, again, behind DEQ and Panhandle Health District funding that the advisory board is committed to. Go ahead to the next slide. So going over to the administrative side, I've stated a few times that support for Panhandle Health District and DEQ and what they do to protect the aquifer is important to us. One thing that was identified through the master plan is trying to come up with more efficient ways to do things. Right now, Panhandle Health District and DEQ, they come to us every January, February, and submit their request for funding. We would like to enter into memorandum of understanding with those two entities separately, which would allow us, we think, allow the county more control of what we are funding and have more time to spell out these are the things that we want to accomplish, and have those discussions with them outside of a grant process. So that's one item there. Go ahead. The next thing has been on everyone's mind, I think, for the past several years is the Aquifer Protection Reserve Fund. As I've said before, the fund balance has grown. We are working to try to bring that fund balance back down, but we do acknowledge that there should be a minimum reserve amount that is established just to stabilize assessment increases over the years and allow us the flexibility to pay for one-time needs that are planned out. So that's that one, and then go ahead. And then the last thing that was identified in the master plan as a priority is just improving our outreach. Again, as the population increases and people move here from other areas, it's important that we spread the word about the aquifer. We'd like to create a roadshow for key stakeholders and agencies so they know what the Aquifer Protection District is and what we do. And also part of this is as we move forward with the sensitive aquifer recharge areas, some of those are located within city limits, which the county doesn't have jurisdiction for, but if we are able to create a model in the county for how to deal with those, the interaction that we have with the cities could be to share that information, similar to what Panhandle Health District has been doing with the 5-acre rule. And I think that is the last slide, and I'm just going to open it up to discussion, questions.
You take over.
It's fine. Questions?
I don't have any questions.
No questions. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So our next steps are we set to approve the master plan?
Yes, we would love your support and approval of the master plan adoption of it for the county.
Okay. And then are we prepared to do that today, or would you like it brought before a business meeting?
I'd like to have it before the business meeting.
Okay.
So.
All right. Well, appreciate that. Public comment?
Chairman Duncan?
Yes.
We received one public comment online from the Kootenai County Spectator. They said, I actually used the status update list, especially the Justice Center expansion, to go back and look at the history of the project, and it's really helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'm Lawrence Scarcello. I'm honored to serve on the Aquifer Board, but I'm speaking right now, I think, more as a private citizen, although this rolls into the aquifer protection efforts, if you will. There's a group of us that have kind of sat back and watched, a group of landowners, if you will, a couple active farmers, a couple active cattle ranchers, a couple active timber landowners. We formed a group called ASAP, Agriculture Sustaining Aquifer Protection. We're going to meet again tomorrow. Our goal is to come up with a open space working lands program. Our goal is to work with the Aquifer Board, the Kootenai County Soil and Water District, the Kootenai County Farm Bureau Board, the U.S. Department of Agriculture Farm Service Administration Office out of Plummer. What we want to do is come up with a working lands open space program, and that is to utilize existing landowners that, frankly, in my view, I'll keep this under 3 minutes today, that are, in my view and the view of these others, there's already people doing the right thing at the right time. I think it lends to aquifer protection, water quality, water quantity, open space, all the things that we value dearly. And I'll keep this pretty brief. We don't have all the answers yet. We've been meeting twice a month. I think we're coming up with some pretty good ideas and a couple hopefully viable solutions. Our goal is to work this on a pattern of a program that's already being offered by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. There's a grasslands program that's fairly close, but it's pretty constrictive. There are CRP programs offered through the USDA, conservation reserve programs, but those are very restrictive. I think the land on the prairie and the land over the aquifer is too dynamic to put it in a box. I think everything is so fluid, literally. We need a working program that has some degree of flexibility, yet some degree of a binding agreement, if you will, say on 5 or 10 year increments. So we're working on this. We'd like to report back to you commissioners maybe in as little as a month of where we're at and what we're kind of proposing. you know, I hope this reserve fund for the Aquifer Board is not a concern to you, because this could be a funding source. I think it rolls into water quality and water quantity. We're also looking at other funding sources. I think we're trying to be very open-minded with this. Again, we're trying to protect what's near and dear to all of us. And frankly, the aquifer is the economy. I think everybody should be fully aware of that. You know, water is a great and wonderful thing, but without water, we got nothing. The aquifer is the economy for Kootenai County as well as Spokane County. So we're being mindful of this. Again, we don't have all the answers, but we're working toward those. Feel free to contact me at any time. But again, we'd like to meet with you in the near future and kick around some more thoughts. So, thank you.
Thank you. All right, anybody else on the line? Nope. All right, last call for public comment. Hearing none, 10:46, meeting adjourned. Thank you all.